I'd like to hear more about the aspect of not owning, because a lot of young people as well they're afraid of not owning. They think they're just going to sell their time and their energy for all these years and then lose it all. And it comes to mind also a very famous quote from Aldo Leopold, which I'm sure you already know the quote. There are two spiritual dangers in not owning a farm. And then it goes on. I don't need to finish the quote, but what were you doing? You were in spiritual danger, Scott.
Yeah.
You didn't own your farm. But I think that that actually, I'm pretty sure you're one that believes that your situation of not owning was a great thing. Or it worked well for you, or am I right in assuming?
No, you are absolutely
So could you
right.
elaborate, like, I think maybe some young people, maybe they need encouragement that
Yeah.
it is a viable option
Yeah.
and that maybe it's not so bad.
Yeah.
Can you talk to that?
It's not so bad. No, definitely. No, I'm really glad that you brought that up because people, especially, farmers in the region where I was farming, people don't know how deep the roots are in the eastern end of Long Island. I mean, there are a couple farmers who so many generations have been on the land that they claim to be the oldest continuously operated farm in New York State. 300 years or over
from the
300.
1600s.
Yeah. So that's quite a heritage. And so many of those farmers or families would look at us like, what are you doing? I mean, we're a family farm that's been here for centuries, and what are you doing? And you don't own the land. The land trust owns the land. And so many people ask me about that, and maybe I was fortunate that I came to it. I came to Quail Hill when I was 39 years old. So, I wasn't in my young 20s saying, I got to find, land to buy. I came at a time where I didn't need that, and nor did I really want that. I was doing it precisely because I didn't own it. I was doing it precisely because this was a way of building and finding and building community that had to do with the old concept of the commons.
Exactly.
And that's what I was missing in this country, where I decided, well, I'm going to go away for a while and find something else. So coming back and this opening up, it just was the right timing in my life, and hopefully for the people that became part of this, CSA thing.
Could you elaborate on the commons idea? Because you made me think of something that, like, I have this romantic vision in my head called a dream of, let's say my whole road, it's a gravel road in Fredericksburg. And what if all of us, all the neighbors, treated all of our land cooperatively as if it was one big farm?
Yeah.
And there wasn't a transactional thing. It was just like, hey, you got fields, I have forest, you have this. How about we have pigs there, this, that, and we can all. Yeah. Now, it's a beautiful concept, but it functions off the fact that it would be a commons mentality. Like, yes, everyone has their own land on paper,
right?
But you could go tend to the cows on someone else's land, and you could gain the experience of caring for that land, even though it's not yours. Yeah, and I view it as like it's a commons.
Yeah.
In Europe, that's what they did. Like when you pasture, it's not your land.
Yeah,
you're pasturing the commons.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's it. That's
even to this day, a lot in I feel like when I see images or something from England, a lot of times it feels like people are walking around these little paths in wide open spaces. I'm like, that's not all their land. This seems like it's a bit more.
Yeah. So there are trails, paths that lead through privately owned land, and it's part of the structure of the law that people are allowed to walk there.
Right.
In fact, stiles are built into the hedgerow. So in the place in Cornwall I lived, it's hard to get across what it looked like, but all these granite stone walls everywhere, and you could walk, the quickest way was a diagonal, instead of following the roadways, and you find your way to the end of the field where there may be some cows out grazing, and there's a stile, and it's made so that you can cross the wall and then go to the next stile and the next. So that's the commons. Why didn't it ever happen in this country? I don't quite know the answer to that.
Rugged individualism.
Yeah, and I don't know. The other thing I would say about that is that I think the farming, like the vocation of farming and the community of farming suffers when there isn't the concept of the commons. I think then what happens. So what you're talking about is it sounds like a wonderful ideal, but it could be a wonderful reality as well, and it has been in the past, but it hasn't been so much in this country. And what suffers is that you're left with individuals taking on the burden of managing land and buildings and whatever, and it makes it very difficult, and it makes it so maybe that's why the number of farmers in this country has shrunk. So I'm talking about the country over there.
Yeah, you're talking about the U.S. No, we're right on the border.
What is that relation like in this country? So 1.5% of the U.S. population is farming.
This podcast is proudly supported by Tessier Greenhouses. Tessier has always been one of my top choices for greenhouses and tunnels. For over 45 years, they've been manufacturing high quality and incredibly strong structures right here in North America. Their products can withstand the heavy snow loads we faced here in the Northeast, and their prices are among the best in the market. Tessier offers excellent service and expertise, always ready to help with customized solutions. I particularly appreciate their commitment to innovation and their willingness to listen to the needs of growers. At the Old Mill, we use several of their Gothic Caterpillar tunnels and micro tunnel for season extension, and I'm always impressed with their design and build quality. Without companies like Tessier, food sovereignty just wouldn't be possible. So thank you, Tessier, for helping us growers feed our community year-round. You guys rock.
Use promo code MGI10 for 10% off your first order and free shipping in select regions.
It's the same,
That's
I
it.
would say.
Yeah, it's the same.
Probably the same.
It's the same. And we're in Stanbridge East here. This was one of the most, this is the eastern townships of Quebec. It was an Anglophone farming community, old families, 300 years.
Yeah.
It really feels that way. Again, last night I was hearing stories about who's who and what happened with the land. And you won't see a lot of these young, young people from these families taking over these farms.
Yeah, right.
Because
Yeah.
they're so expensive.
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about this. That I read it recently. Maybe it was in Michael. I actually just reread Omnivore's Dilemma after reading it way before I even got into farming.
Oh, yeah.
Because I just wanted to retouch that book. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was in there, maybe it wasn't, but he referenced something along the lines of, you could ask yourself the question, have we gone too far in the rugged individualism mindset in our modern society here in North America, especially to the point that there's some major detriment coming of it. And I think part of it could be this idea of no commons and saying, like, when you spoke about Cornwall in the UK, there was a sense that probably through the commons nature of your environment, it feels like there's more connection to the land at a broader scale from just what your property is. Meaning, like, I don't know, the way people speak when they talk about their life in, let's say, England, like every little feature around has a name, and the way you talk, it's so different from how we can, like here, I live at the foot of Montpinac, but it doesn't feel like that really because it just feels so separate in a way. But I envy that ability to speak in that way and that feeling of connection to the land that's beyond just my property.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think there's something there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I learned to garden in England, and actually first I originally went to England to study, to get an MFA, a Master's in Fine Arts in writing. And I lived in Oxford, and I got a job as a gardener to support myself for a pound an hour, as a matter of fact. and I worked with gardeners who I don't think it would have happened here in this country. There's no way it would have happened. So I worked, with gardeners who they'd been doing it forever, and their parents and going back and everything. And that feeling of there wasn't a separation between the earth and the human being working the earth, really. And you can't really describe that. You just have to be next to it and be part of it or something. And so that carried on when I was in Oxford for a couple of years, and that carried on when we moved to Cornwall, which is the southwest tip of England, way out there on a peninsula, very near to what's called Land's End. And there were these cliff meadows, very, very steep cliff meadows, all surrounded by granite block that faced the water, a bay, and this was called the earliest ground in Britain. And I heard that phrase, and I thought, what does that mean? Well, the first new potatoes, the first flowers that came out of these meadows got shipped to London. This was the earliest ground in Britain. And I thought, boy, I want to be part of that, whatever it was.
Wow.
And so I found a mentor. There were only a couple old fellows working the ground at that time, and everybody thought, well, what's this kid from the U.S. doing, down there in the meadows with these couple guys? But I can't even describe what I learned from being in those meadows and from, well, so here's one story I'm remembering now. So I was driving down in the village in my little Mini, and very narrow streets into this very, very old fishing village. And Edgar, who was my mentor, had lived in the village all his life, he comes around, he's walking, he comes around the corner and sees me in my little Mini, and he walks over to he didn't say hi or wave or anything, he walks over to a bush, a hydrangea bush, and hugs the bush like this. It was such an amazing gesture. Like, I thought, he's saying hello to me. There's some commonality between us that has to do with plants. It was such an amazing gesture. It's funny that I can, I'm remembering it now, 40 years later or something like that. And something about that gesture of actually being part of things that were growing.
He was born there, all his life there.